Hello, everybody, and to this lovely Wednesday lunchtime. Yes, it is the right day. Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah from the Property Marketing Strategist.
And I'm Deenie.
And as part of our Youth Forum programme, we recently hosted a focus group and conducted a survey to students asking what they want from their future home. Whilst this is a small piece of research, we thought it was interesting enough and significant enough to share with the sector. So thank you for joining to hear more about the research and also get the views of our esteemed panel of experts. Cue wave. Thank you to Student Crowd for being our Youth Forum partners and to Utopia for sponsoring the Youth Forum. We'll start by presenting the data and then we will come back to our panellists to share their reactions to the insight. If you have any questions along the way, please use the Q&A function and we will get to these in the second half of today's webinar. I'm going to hand over to Deenie now to start presenting.
You just bear with me while I sort the technicals out. So hopefully you can all see the presentation, Beyond the Basics, the future of student spaces. First, just a little bit of an introduction to the Youth Forum. It's an initiative that we brought to the sector together with our partners, Student Crowd and sponsors Utopia. And we did it to inform the sector about what potential customers want from the residential experience. We tried to do this not about people who are your current customers, but those that aren't your customers and your residents, but could be if we listen to what they want. As ever, the reports and soundbites we do with the Youth Forum are free to the sector because we want to ensure the sector can continually improve and be better. So basically, we do the hard work, so you don't have to. We do run a Youth Forum every couple of months about key issues impacting the living sector and what young people want from a home. Although we can use our Youth Forum database to do some bespoke research. So if you want to look at some particular products and services for yourself, that is something we can do. So a slight shameless plug, but do get in touch with us if you would like some help with that. And we are also looking for new sponsors for our 2026 Youth Forum season. So again, if you want to influence the topics or get more involved in this research project and get your name in lights, then please do get in touch with us.
So today we're going to talk about our latest Youth Forum survey about what student accommodation should look like in the future. We did the survey in kind of August and September. The data set was a little bit smaller than we would have liked. We normally produce a nice glossy, gorgeous report, but because it's a smaller data set, we decided that we'll take a snapshot now and we will share that with you today. So we wanted to ensure that we gave our participants enough space without barriers. We wanted them to come up with their own ideas. So what we usually do is a survey first of all, and then a focus group, but we decided to switch it up this time and allow the focus group to really lead the survey. We were looking for blue sky thinking. We wanted to hear how students want developers and operators to disrupt the sector and also universities. And we wanted innovative solutions. But did we get that? So we started with a focus group. So we're now going to start by sharing some of the views of our focus group participants. So over to our students. Oh, I don't think we can hear that.
I was worried about that. I don't know. The technical difficulties that I'm not sure you can hear the sound and I don't know if I can fix it. Let me just try. I don't know. Should we skip the videos and maybe we can share them after the event? We should have checked this.
I'm really sorry about that. That's completely our fault for not testing videos on Canva. But hopefully everybody that has signed up has received the report, and if not, you will receive it afterwards. So we will make sure that you get those.
So apologies for that, everyone. What you would have heard if you were able to see the video was that they talk about good quality, well-maintained spaces, social events, better marketing, which of course we can help with if you need better marketing, and fulfilling promises. So really none of it is groundbreaking of what students are looking for. It's stuff that comes up time and time again in our Youth Forum survey, but they just want good quality spaces. But what did students say in our survey say? We asked, if you were to design the student accommodation of the future, what would it have? And in terms of volume of comments about the rooms, the most were around storage and en suites, with a different consideration for different body sizes, which I think is something that we'd never considered before, which we found quite interesting. But also the need to personalise space and features that promote good quality sleep were also important. If you haven't checked out Loft and a designer at Heart's Nestbox solution, it's a favourite of ours, which covers both the storage solution and also the personalisation of it. So do make sure you go and check that out if you can.
So when it comes to the kitchen and living areas, the biggest requirement that we saw in the verbatim comments was overwhelmingly more space in the kitchen. And I think we have turned a corner since COVID and the cost of living has increased. So now we find that students are staying in more than going out. And, you know, you only have to look at TikTok to see how many, you know, recipe videos there are. So we think that there is a kind of resurgence of students wanting to stay in and cook and have somewhere nice to eat together to do so as well. There's a nice addition at the new fusion scheme at Brent Cross with dividers between the kitchen and the living space, which we think is quite nice, as you can sit and cook and also watch TV without kind of getting in the way of each other. Another solution to this could be about islands or breakfast bars. This would do a great job of creating more space as well. And whilst we do know that HMO and ANAC regulations stipulate the minimum requirement in a kitchen, it doesn't feel like the minimum requirements is cutting it anymore. And the minimum isn't necessarily optimum. In the Art of Co-Living book by Louise, he identified that the kitchen can be the main area of conflict in a shared flat. So doing what you can do to design spaces that reduce this conflict would give residents a much more homely feel, you know, such as dishwashers. And also, we always think, don't we always work in the kitchen when we're in our homes? So having that kind of work from home space within a kitchen also feels like a really good addition. Getting out of the bedroom is something most PBSAs encourage, but the kitchens should be at the heart of the home where everybody could come together to relax, work, cook, eat and socialise.
And I'm afraid we won't show that video, so a big apologies again. But the students there were in our focus group were talking about the lack of communal space in university accommodation. Quite often it's assumed that they will use the rest of the campus, but maybe this isn't always convenient. And it doesn't feel like home if you have to put your shoes on to go and sit on the sofa. We believe that this university experience is influencing how students potentially feel about PBSA and kind of moving on accommodation. They don't understand the difference because we aren't really making it clear and we aren't really educating people about the different types of accommodation that is available for students. Flexible study space was the biggest request from our survey, especially soundproof pods. And I'm sure we've all had that experience of getting annoyed with people talking very loudly on FaceTime or other things without headphones on. So it's a great solution for people to have those kind of video calls. But also, again, times have changed and students are at home a lot. They're gaming, they're watching Netflix, they're speaking with friends and family. And without soundproof spaces, this can get really quite annoying for everyone all around. We do see a lot of open plan study space and also some PBS buildings with great study rooms, which is great, but it's not often that individual private study base, which seems that students are looking more for. We've also never seen study space like a co-working space with static screens so students can plug in their laptops in, maybe with the mice and keyboards available, which would really give students an incentive to leave their rooms and go and do an hour or two private study down in those social spaces.
So health and well-being, as you can see, is very important to students, and they're looking for space to either exercise or have mindful space. Access to a free or affordable gym and outdoor spaces were the most frequent comments on our open questions. One thing that we really, really loved here was the idea of drying facilities. And actually, it's a really good suggestion because whilst buildings have laundries, not everything can be tumble dried. So if you're not tumble drying things, where do you hang them? And you're not meant to hang them in your room because it creates condensation and mold. It's very common in Japan to see drying rooms even in student accommodation, but we've never seen it here in the UK despite our inclement weather. So we thought that was a really innovative solution, actually. Remove damp and make living spaces more comfortable. In our focus groups, they also talk a lot, and we see this time and time again, about wanting to be matched with like-minded flatmates. And here they're linking it to well-being, actually. And surely that's a basic need. We all want to live with people that have the same values. The students here didn't mention it, but we're starting to hear about rooms where technology is left at the door, a really quiet no-tech space, and we'd love to see that as well.
Next, we asked kind of around sustainable and smart design, and I think what you can see here is they mentioned things like green roofs, solar panels, rainwater harvesting, which kind of blew us away because that's all really there. It's not groundbreaking, it's not new, and there's so much awareness of sustainability. And I guess as a sector, we're not really talking enough about residents, what we're already putting in. We know there's so many innovative solutions implemented during the build, but as I say, it's rarely passed on to marketing or ops. So the residents don't know it exists because the people that are speaking with the residents aren't aware that it's there. The fact that this is in response to what buildings should have in the future, when most of the modern accommodation already has it, to us kind of says that we're not doing enough in this area. But it also says something about the renovation of first generation stock, which the sector has talked about a lot. And if it isn't delivering this in the spaces that it can, why not? What can we do around that first generation stock? Most of this isn't actually even about the build. It can be retrospectively installed or implemented. Real plants, not fake ones, recycling and composting and communicating that effectively. So really just getting that message across about why it's there and what the benefit is and how to get involved.
So the responses about community and belonging were a real mix, proving that there isn't just one solution for all. So in our opinion, flexible communal space would be the best option. Spaces that can be used for a multiple of things, but then changed when there is a new trend or a new cohort that wants something different. The same goes for social events. In theory, they should be different every year or semester to meet the needs of that particular intake. But really, homeliness is the key takeaway here, and touches such as full-length mirrors and comforting colours and textures are key. These spaces are home for at least a year, so they shouldn't be treated as transient or temporary homes. More on that coming up, but just a little anecdote. I used to work for an operator, and the investors were very keen to take over some car park space and put in a gym and loads more social space, but I insisted that we send a survey out to the residents to see what they wanted. And to be honest, the students wanted a full-length mirror and a coat hook in their room. That obviously could have saved the investors lots and lots of capex, and it was what they wanted to make their room feel like a home. So again and again, it's those basic things that make their life easier and more comfortable, for a year or more.
Once again, I'm the bearer of bad news and have to say what you've missed out in the video. But what we would have heard there is the importance of living with like-minded people. We kind of think a year is a really long time to live with people that you don't really have that much in common with. But there is technology out there to help with this, but I don't think we're really seeing nearly enough of it actually being utilised. Chiara, one of our Youth Forum members, did mention in that video that some students will have complex needs, and neurodiverse students find a lot about living in shared flats with strangers a real challenge. So for Chiara, her option was to only live in a studio. That was the only option because that was out of necessity to give her a kind of comfortable space when she was studying. But as a consequence, she's paying a lot for that. We have heard about quiet flats some universities are introducing, whereby they are unoccupied and anyone who needs time out can come and spend a night with a fully fitted out kitchen, with a friend or a parent or carer to get that space that they need to kind of reset themselves, which we think is a great initiative. And for any provider out there that aren't at 100% occupancy, this is an easy one for PBSA to replicate. Academic success was something we were keen to ask our students about in our survey, because that's really what the purpose of any student accommodation is, to provide a home while people are studying. And the responses were very clear, that you might think that Wi-Fi is a given, but actually frequently on university campuses it can be intermittent, which again might influence how other students are feeling around kind of moving into other university accommodation or student accommodation. We're about to see more data on this, but from this response, it would seem that students would value career and academic support over social events and mental health and support. And actually all of this here would support with positive mental well-being holistically.
Okay, so we're now going to move on to what our survey students told us they don't want. So we will ask them what if they were to build accommodation of the future, what would it not have? And this couldn't be clearer for us. And there is something very striking about the language here. There are words like cramped, sterile, rigid, overbearing, outdated, and inaccessible. And if you listen to our house podcast or follow us on socials, you'll know how we feel about product diversity, and there isn't enough of it. And it's clear from this survey that customers know this, and we need to move from a one-size-fits-all model. However, we do know from the focus groups that a lot of this is based on their experience in uni halls, and that shouldn't be the case, but it can be influencing how they expect PBSA to be as well. We think there should be more time spent on promoting the rooms and the flats rather than just the communal areas. The students, when they're referring to their home, they mean their room, their flat, and we would like to see this prioritised for more innovation.
So unfortunately, you haven't been able to hear what the students have said in our focus groups, but hopefully we've given you a flavour of what they were saying, and we will do our best to try and get you some versions of those videos so you can watch them yourself. But now we're going to go a bit more into kind of what the hard data told us from the survey, which we followed up the focus groups with. And so we asked, based on your experiences, what would your ideal contract include? And as we can see, bills included still is the big winner here, but there's also a big demand for laundry. If you listen to our podcast or follow us on socials, you'll know that we do have a bit of bugbear with laundry, and we've talked about this a lot around if it is all bills included, why laundry is excluded. So I think there is more interest from students to keep that laundry included. Most people that we speak to say that they make very little ancillary income from it, so it kind of makes sense to keep that included. Deposits also seem unpopular, which is very tricky when students need to book for their next year but haven't yet had their first deposit returned. And we know there's lots of different ways that some people don't offer deposits, but that feels like something that is causing some concerns.
So of the students that said they want some bills included, we want to delve into a bit more, and it's not surprising really which ones they want. Cleaning and catering is at the bottom of the list. We also found contents insurance interesting, as it's usually included certainly in university and PBSA accommodation. So they probably don't see the value of it or even aware of it, but it's one of those things that if they didn't have it, they'd probably soon come a cropper and realise why it's important.
Next up, we asked around technology and which ones they would rank most highly, and what came out top is noise cancelling or quiet study areas, which linked into what we said earlier about those kind of individual soundproof study pods. Next up was parcel lockers and shopping delivery boxes. Do hold that thought because we are going to come back to this later. But also back when we were talking about like-minded individuals here, that roommate matching app comes up quite highly, as well as a resident app, all very popular. The least popular is smart tech in the room. And again, students are looking for academic success, so ease of shopping and also the ability to impact who they live with and convenience of living in that building. All things that are very able for technology to deliver now. Again, nothing future scoping or gazing into a crystal ball of where technology may go.
So we wanted to pull in some different data from a youth forum we've done earlier this year that we thought would be relevant for you, around the question of, do students really understand what PBSA is selling them? So we asked in this question what features students would expect to pay more for. This tells us what they value and what they expect to pay more for. So they expect an ensuite, their own kitchen, which could be a studio or a shared kitchen, more space, sharing with fewer people, and a double bed. But what we can see here is they really don't expect to have to pay more for a good view or a higher floor. We do commonly see this in pricing strategies, whereas we think there's more valuable ways that could make a difference in the experience if you're looking for that differential in price setting. You know, a good view is subjective anyway, and as I'm sure we're all aware, views can change. And it also makes allocating really, really difficult. If you're expecting people to pay more for a higher floor or a good view, then if you have to move their rooms around, then that can become problematic and impact your reviews.
So next up is the service students feel would bring the most value to their living experience. And remember that we talked about parcel lockers being high up on technology. They're really low down here when it comes to humans passing them the parcel. So there really is a correlation there between, you know, lockers and storage for parcels and actually someone handed to them. And room cleaning obviously would add real value, but I don't think they want to pay for it. And a lot of universities do this in some shared areas. So again, is there an expectation that cleaning should be included when they move out to PBSA in their kind of second or third year? But despite what our focus group participants said, mental health support is less valued and events even less so. Both things that PBSA does do a lot of investment in, and universities. Are we doing it right, or are we investing in the wrong areas?
So who would students prefer to live with? So here you can see a small demand for a more flexible way of living. They don't necessarily just want to live with students. We know in PBSA and university accommodations, only students can live together, but in HMOs and BTR, there aren't so many restrictions. So perhaps we're starting to see why these asset classes are so popular with students. We know from working particularly with universities that students sometimes choose not to live there if they can't live with their boyfriend or girlfriend, if that boyfriend or girlfriend is not a student. Whereas in BTR or HMOs, they could live with whoever they want.
And keeping on the theme of kind of BTR and co-living, we also asked the question about would students want to stay in their accommodation at the end of their studies, and 48% want to move, but we found that 27% and 26% don't want to move out of their studies, and 26 would like to stay in the same place and 27 aren't sure. So that's quite a big cohort that could potentially be attractive to BTR because they don't need to move on when they finish their studies. We do have a habit of categorising who can live in certain homes in real estate in the UK. And again, it's like bugbears of ours that we're providing this segmentation all the time. And sometimes it can feel unnecessary to have that when homes and people come in all shapes and sizes. We've said it before and continue to say that the shared living as a sector has a role to play in the housing crisis. So siling out groups of people the right thing to do. There's clearly some students that do want that, and there's definitely a role for that, but there's clearly a lot of students that don't want that. So there's potential to adjust those products accordingly.
So what contract lengths would students prefer? Now, the video soundbite on this was really, really interesting. So hold your suspense, and like Deenie said, we will get it sent to you. But what we often hear is that they're too long for most students, with an average undergraduate term being 36 weeks. So 39% agree with that, and that they actually would only really want a term time contract, whereas PBSA contracts are often much longer. But actually in the videos, what we heard is that pesky 52nd week is actually really problematic for some students, particularly international students or students that are just living far from their family. What the video told us is that what are they meant to do in that missing week, and that they can't necessarily afford to fly backwards and forwards or travel backwards and forwards. So that is actually causing, a big problem. It's great if you want to promote returning students and you can do that kind of rolling contract. And we know anecdotally that most of the time that 52nd week is kind of given away free. But if you're not publicising it, if you're not actively promoting it, it seems to be causing a little bit of confusion.
Sorry, missed the video again. And just some of our kind of key takeaways that first up, we're sorry you didn't get to see the videos, and we're also sorry that we didn't give you some futuristic ideas. Time and time again, though, our research shows that it really boils down to the same thing, that it's the basics done well is all students really want. And I think from our overriding view that this is very much about the flat, which we think is a part of the building that is often overlooked for development in favour of fancy common spaces, which as marketeers is a dream because they're great to sell. But when you consider the resident and their long-term experience of living in that building, isn't necessarily going to add the most value. Somewhere to get good sleep, live with people they like, and have things fixed quickly, and a polite, supportive customer service team that makes it feel like home is the things that they value the most. And maybe we should consider how many flats we can get in these big, expansive and beautiful communal spaces in PBSA, and what that might do to revenue and the other big issue for students, which is affordability.
So you can view the videos and hear firsthand from our focus groups, as well as signing up to our reports, or do have a chat with us about bespoke research as well. We do a lot of that, but our clients own the data, so we can't share it with you as well. So thank you for sticking with us. You've now heard enough from us. So let's hear from our panel, who have been patiently waiting to have their say. So, esteemed panel, would you like to introduce yourselves? I'm going to go to you first, Louise.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Louise. I'm the CMO of Torsion Group. We are a fully integrated model. We invest, develop, construct, and operate. I also am the managing director of the operating arm, Luna.
Perfect. Over to James.
Hi everybody, thanks for joining us. My name's James Greenwood. I'm the head of residential life communications, and I oversee the overall student experience for students at the London School of Economics. Thank you for having me today.
Perfect. And last but not least, Clayre.
Hello everyone, I'm Clayre Massey. I'm an architect and associate partner at Sheppard Robson. I've been specialising in student living now for about 13 and a half years, which is probably longer than some sort of student resi companies have been out there. But in that time, I've seen designed, delivered and advised on probably about 20,000 beds now across the length and the breadth of the UK. And every time I approach a new project, I always approach it with a different approach and an eyes wide open approach. As you say, Sarah, nothing's the same and it shouldn't be.
Didn't we discuss, Clayre, how many students your buildings may have encountered in that tenure as well?
We did, and it was a question I was asked at a webinar, not a webinar, a live conference, and it was a GSL conference actually last year. So somebody asked me on the way down, I said, you know what, I need to work that out. And I think it was something like 76,000 students. Hopefully I've positively influenced, and some of those students now are probably turning 30. So I did suddenly feel very old at the same time.
Well, we're very lucky to have you to share all that experience with us. So the first thing I'm going to ask the panelists is, what are your initial reactions to the research? Obviously, you received it before this webinar, so you've had a bit of time to digest it. But did anything shock or surprise you at all? I'm going to go to you first, James.
No, I don't think there's any huge shockers there. And I guess it goes to the theme of this webinar, which is keeping the basic stuff really good and keeping to the basics. But some of those points for me were definitely good storage, and we've known this for a very long time now, and I think that's really important to get that right, both in the bedroom and, as the webinar said, in the kitchen spaces too, where students want to store additional belongings. It was quite interesting to hear about air drying laundry, and I think that's been a big one for us for a while. A lot of my wellbeing teams and pastoral teams kind of come down hard, I'd say, on students sometimes when they're air drying in their rooms because of the mold, etc., etc. So, you know, let's look at that and let's look at what facilities we can create for students. I've seen it done really well in the States, so it'd be great to see that in the UK. A bit about sustainability there, and I don't think we talk about it enough, and I think that's the problem. As the webinar says, we do it well, but we don't talk about it. I think we've still got a long way to go there in terms of sustainability, and I think that it would be great if we saw more PBSA working with charities and organisations like Students Organising for Sustainability. They're great. We work with them, and they all do all of our comms basically, so our students do know about it, and we gamify it and all of the other things that students want. Hidden costs, that came up a few times on a few different slides and in a few of those videos. That's my biggest bugbear. I don't think students should have to pay for faster Wi-Fi. I don't think that students should pay for a gym if it's being used to sell a building anyway, and it's part of the building. Why would you charge extra? That should be part of those costs. There was one other point. Oh, a bit I didn't agree with actually was the flexible contracts. I think actually that percentage at the end was really low, and I think more students actually want more flexible contracts. It's definitely something we're seeing on the university side, and I understand it's easier done maybe for universities, and it's definitely easier in some cities versus other cities. But you know, if that means cheaper rents, then I think it's something we should definitely look at. But there's a few points there. Thanks, Sarah.
I think with the video, just spoiler alert for everyone who is waiting to watch it after this this webinar, one student kind of pointed out that they live at university accommodation, and she knew her room was empty, but she wasn't able to check in for the next year, you know, and that put her basically homeless for a week. And I guess what's maybe sometimes not understood is that universities often have, you know, a high level of kind of conferencing and summer events, and their rooms aren't actually, you know, available. So there is that debate between that kind of summer income versus that student experience as well. So we understand that it's a really hard one to kind of balance.
I think just on that, Sarah, it's about also, again, it's a communication piece to the students. We're really clear to our students at LSE that summer income isn't used as an additional income stream. It's used to lower the rents for the rest of the term. It's the clear reason why we want tourists throughout summer and Christmas, etc. And again, I know it's easier sometimes for universities to run that operation, but got to make it really clear to the students as to why we're doing it. It helps them in the long term. So yeah, thanks.
Perfect. Louise, what are your initial reactions to the presentation?
You know, I actually would pick up on the well-being area of it, because what students were asking for there really isn't a lot. And actually, as I looked through that list, it made me think we're not actually doing all of it. Some of it we're attempting to do, but it's still, for me, well-being is experience. They go hand in hand, because if somebody is not looking after themselves or are having challenges, when you look at that list, it's not huge. I mean, some of them, let's take an affordable gym. So a lot of the new builds at the moment do have gyms in them, and you walk past them and those gyms are actually often quite empty. And then it comes back down to creating the experience and getting students to use them. Maybe it's a buddy system, maybe it's a free PT session that's part of the experience program. But as I went through that list, I was like, there's not a lot there that they're asking for. Some of it feels impractical, as in counsellors on site, you know, finding private spaces, but actually Student Roosts, with their initiative Behind Every Door, they have found a way to meet some form of requirement. Peer support is probably something we could do better. So, and again, even though we match our students with their requirements as they request them to make sure they've got a flat they're happy in, it's not always possible, but how much effort are we putting into doing that? So I can see some of the practicalities that deter us as operators from completing those. But I look at that list and I'm like, they're not asking for the world. And actually, this is part of experience and we all talk about it. So are we doing it? So for me, that was a huge takeaway, that okay, I haven't got a drying facility yet, but on the next build, I will really be trying to do that. James, I need to see what you've seen. Send me the pictures.
Thanks so much, Louise. And Clayre, anything from you that was shocking or surprising?
I think I agree with Louise. I don't think there's anything particularly in that list that I'm shocked or surprised by. I think one thing I'm shocked by is that students actually still feel the need to spell these things out. You know, I think it's high time as a sector we sat up and we listened to their voices, because at the end of the day, they're, you know, whilst we've got developers and universities that we work with, the students are our customers, and if we don't listen to our customers and what they want, they will vote with their feet, and they will go and find the things that they want elsewhere. So I think it's really important that some of these basic things actually can be done. And is it time to kind of prioritize the functionality over the aesthetics? You know, have we gone a little bit too far the other way? Have we been prioritising the aesthetics and the shiny glossy images and actually forgetting that some of this functionality is actually the root of all of this? But functionality isn't an easy sell, is it? But it becomes something that becomes very difficult to rectify when it doesn't go right. And actually a couple of coat hooks you mentioned, Sarah, rather than a gym, actually it's a on the, you know, on the spreadsheet on the bottom line, that's a win-win really, isn't it? So yeah, I think personally I applaud the students for kind of, you know, spelling this out to us. And yeah, I will absolutely sit up and listen, but what's on their list is probably on mine.
Yeah, I mean, this survey was quite different to other ones that we've done because a lot of it was free text, and we wanted those verbatim comments, which we know has impacted the actual numbers of responses. It didn't kind of fall necessarily that neatly into boxes. But did you, when we told you that we were doing this, did you expect that there would be more blue sky thinking? Were you thinking that there'd be something groundbreaking or more futuristic?
I'm not quite sure I thought they would, actually. I think I've just been, well, I'm still in the process of doing, but I'm taking my son at the moment around university. So I'm now looking at accommodation from a parent's point of view. And actually some of the things that he's talking about and he's asking for are pretty much what your students have been asking for. So he's looking for spaces to study that's quiet, but actually he's more interested in the kitchen environment than he is really in his room, because he's looking for a space where he can go and find and make those friends. And actually when he walked into the kitchens, if it didn't work for him, he just went, no, Mum, I'm out, I'm done. Not for me. And I said, do you want to see the room? And he said, no, because the kitchen isn't going to work. I don't understand how 4 or 5 people could be in there at the same time. It's not comfortable, and therefore how am I supposed to make friends? So it's going to sort of spoil his sort of enjoyment of university life. So I found that interesting to kind of see it through his eyes, as well as mine, and try and piece those things together. So yeah, I'm not surprised it's necessarily blue sky thinking, because I think maybe the blue sky thinking is more the practical side of things rather than we need a new fandangle kind of room type or something like that. I think students will find the spaces that work for them and make them work for them if they function well.
What about you, Louise and James? Did you think, you know, when you asked that question of if you could have anything in the world in student accommodation, that there wasn't anything maybe a little bit more dynamic or inventive?
No, I mean, they're not. I look at the True building that's got a slide in it. You know, that's for our sector, that's quite unusual, isn't it? But would a student, as they're sat there filling out that questionnaire, think how much fun would it be to have a slide in there, unless they were encouraged and really pushed, or a massive trampoline, which would be everyone's health and safety nightmare. But that, I don't think they're sat there thinking it. They think about, oh, what do I need at this stage? And actually that's really helpful for us, because all those amazing, we wouldn't do a trampoline, but all the extras just add to a development appraisal and we're constantly trying to make them balance so we can make them work and continue building high quality products. So I'm not really surprised, but I still think if you said you could have anything, a dinosaur statue in the garden, you know, whatever it might be, whatever crazy thing, it wouldn't actually add to their experience. So I think it's a really good thing that they've come in with, I just need to be looked after and I just need the basics.
What about you, James?
Yeah, I agree, Louise. And Clayre mentioned some of the points there about, I think linking it back to, in my world in universities, you know, some of our accommodation isn't shiny, it isn't all, you know, fancy with slides and all of that. We don't have that. But actually the students are really happy and the satisfaction's really great. And some of those buildings are old and some of them are tired, but genuinely I feel like we do quite a lot of the basics quite right, and we really protect their well-being, and we really look after them and provide all of those extra services that they might not get in other accommodation options. I'm laughing at some of I shouldn't laugh, but the really serious comments in the chat as well around the Premier Inn model, which is a really good example actually. You know, get the basics right, a decent good night's sleep, a good mattress, that naturally for students will then impact their well-being and their academic performance. You know, if we get those basics right, they will perform well and they will rave about the student accommodation because they will be happy and they will have had a good time. and actually that's what we're razor sharp focused on, and not actually when the residents arrive. Way before, when we're building buildings, we will get stakeholders and students in the room. We'll talk about, do you want this as part of the build? If we put a slide in, we will need to remove X, Y, and Z. What would be the options there that you would like? And I can guarantee and put money on what the students will choose. They won't choose a slide. Or even sometimes, we've just talked about gyms and swimming pools and things. Actually, if there's one local in the area and we can develop a partnership with them and get a great deal in place, then I would rather do that and give them a super gym, which is huge, rather than something that's kind of small and crammed in if it's down the road. So, it's going back to the theme, is it? Get the basic stuff right. And I think that's where we get thriving and happy students.
And making it convenient, knowing that there's a gym that they can use. They'll still have a bit of that community, because if the whole building has access to it, then they can still use it. And those basics, a good night's sleep is so important. We have actually worked with Loft and tested mattresses ourselves to make sure that we could sleep on them, to make sure they were good enough for our customers. They were excellent.
And I think that's the point around communication, is that there is a lot of thought goes into these things, but we probably don't, there is lots of partnerships and we don't really communicate it enough. It's not good enough to say, oh, there's access to a gym. It's access to a gym, and this gym is going to be better and greater, and all these things that you have. Clayre, I just wanted to ask you, and I know you told about kind of your son and how he's interested in the kitchen, but in your view as an architect, are you seeing any development around actually the room or what's going on in the room, or are we still very much focused on that amenity space and how that can be used?
Oh, what a question. I think probably up until about 4, 5, maybe even 6 years ago, certainly working for private developers, they would have what they might call their design book or their playbook, which sort of set out as sort of a standard ensuite room or a standard premium room or a studio or something that they have through their developments. And I completely understand why they had that. It's about kind of building a brand, building an identity. But I think sort of since COVID, I've not seen many of them come through. And I think probably one of the reasons for that is probably obviously in the architectural world, there's been lots of changing around kind of fire regulations. So people have been having to go back and re-look at these kind of sort of stencil designs, if you like, and layouts, and thinking, actually, is there a way that we could do this better? And certainly every time I approach a development, even if I'm handed one of these design books, I challenge it. And sometimes from challenging things, you can actually look at it and say, well, is that space at the end of the bed really useful? Would it not be better to have a slightly wider room? Could you not sort of grapple all of these little pockets of space and actually do something far better with it? Or can we make the rooms more efficient and actually make them slightly smaller and put that area back into the kitchen? Is there a more positive way of sort of re-looking at this through fresh eyes perspective? Sometimes that gets met with a resounding no. We do what we do, we like what we do, but actually sort of questioning that sort of makes us and everyone else around us kind of think, are we doing the right things for our future customers? Because just building what worked maybe 10 years ago is probably not necessarily what students need now, and certainly not what students will need when that building comes to fruition and they're actually booking that building 4 or 5 years' time. So I think yes and no. I think amenity space is still important, but it's what you class as amenity space. And I would certainly class kitchens as amenity space, because I think if we think of amenity space, your first thoughts are, as Louise said, the slides, it's the big sort of shiny, glossy, big sort of gathering spaces. But what about those kitchens, those intermediary spaces where people make their first friendships? And if the kitchens are done, I don't want to say wrongly, but not well, then they're not going to come out of their rooms in the first instance. So getting them into those amenity spaces, the bigger ones and the gyms and everything else, that's a harder battle to have, because they're isolating themselves from the very start. So yeah, my bugbear, if I was to put my 2 pence worth in, is kitchens. And I think they're always the last things to be designed. But for me, I think they've got to be the first. So yeah, I would, to come back to your question, I think developers are looking to innovate things that maybe they weren't innovating before, but the innovations aren't huge leaps. They are just, let's take a step back, let's have a look at what we have, let's see if we can do things a little bit better. And actually, is this something that we can make even more affordable? Is it now even more in tune with what students actually want? Do students need hugely, massively deep desks? You know, we're all probably sitting watching this webinar now on a laptop, and we can find a small cafe or something like that and kind of sit and work. Do they want the length of the desk? Do they want something that is much more flexible? Do they want things for screens and gamers? You know, are we all tied to a 600mm deep desk for huge screens that used to have all the big back boxes on if you're a child from the 90s, or you were a student in the 90s as I was? You know, do we still need all of these things? You know, what actually is important to students right now? And I think, yeah, I would say maybe we all need to sit back and question what we have done to work out what we should be doing.
I think that's
Can
really
I just say as well,
I was just going to say,
I really vouch.
Sorry, Jay.
Yeah. I was just saying, I really vouch for Clayre. I mean, Clayre was talking then about challenging, and me and Clayre have worked on joint projects and still are working on joint projects at LSE, and we've been challenged quite healthily, which is good. And that's what we want. But something that was mentioned quite a lot by the students and in the decks was about those flexible spaces too. And as Clayre was saying, you know, in 5 or 10 years' time, if we're working on development now, what's relevant now probably will not be relevant or be slightly out of date in 5 or 10 years' time. So, you know, I'm thinking more across the wider building, but if we can embed flexible spaces where possible, that just really helps us in 10 years' time to tweak that space and make it way more relevant to what's cool and trendy to a younger audience at that time.
Yeah, definitely. I've just echo what Clayre was saying about the kind of the kitchen space in our own homes. I'm sure if we redesigning space, the kitchen is usually the first thing. It's the heart of the home. You know, so it'd be really great that prioritised. Just want to move on to a bit another question, and Robert Kingham in the Q&A has mentioned it as well. So we were kind of fascinated by the focus on the lone student. You know, we kept seeing the students like they don't want humans to hand their parcels over. They want individual study booths. They want soundproofing, etc. The sector tries so hard to reduce isolation and create community, and I do think it's one of our greatest successes of the sector. But we saw that students don't necessarily want it. So how far should the sector go to fight against what students want? You know, they want to live with like-minded people. They want to have the choice over who they live with. You know, Robert's point is, isn't university a place where you should be trying to meet and get on with new people? You know, I don't know, where do we stick with that? I feel like we've got this kind of push-pull situation going on here. I think universities probably, you know, that we've spoken to are kind of like, no, we will put you with a mix of people. There is technology that could help with that, but do we want the technology?
I don't mind kicking off that question, Sarah. So specifically around parcel collection, I talk about this all the time with the teams about what do we do? Do we start automating things, or do we keep the way that we've done it for a while? And to be quite honest, I'm still on the fence, because what I try and do is I try and think of myself not in the student accommodation bubble, break that bubble. If we look in the real world now, nobody goes to post office and has a long conversation with the person, you know, like we were used to in the olden days. You know, when I collect my millions of vintage parcels that I get delivered every week, I go to a collection point. You know, it's all automated. I scan the QR code and that's what I do. And students will be doing that too. You know, outside of that bubble of their student accommodation, they'll be doing all of that. So actually, should we be mirroring the real world more? I think we probably should. And if we don't, the students are probably looking at us thinking it's quite old-fashioned that I need to go to a desk and ask for my parcel. But you know, the reason why I'm on the edge about it all is there's some pros to that, where we can have a conversation with the student. We can, in a smaller building where we really know students, we could look at their appearance. Do they look well? Maybe we can have a conversation about their well-being and pick up on all of those points. But I am on the fence when it comes to specifically parcel collection and that engagement with the students, because I think we just need to look at the real world sometimes. And we get so engrossed in this bubble of student accommodation that we think it's the right way, whereas actually the world outside of us is moving much faster. So yeah, that's my brutal, honest opinion.
Thank you, Louise. What do you know, where do you stand with kind of forcing connections?
Well, you can look at it from this point of view, which is something that came up recently at Luna, is if we did automate the parcel collection, then actually you've got more space to have meaningful conversations, not just the quick, here's your parcel, how's your day? And that, you know, anybody that works in those buildings knows it's relentless. And the mountain of parcels is relentless. So using technology to ease the strain on our property teams, because this business is all about people, then actually I think the students will get more out of the team or higher service level, because they've instantly got their parcel, but also then when they've got a problem or the building's efficiency could be run better because we're freeing up our people. And let's face it, handing out the parcels is no one's favourite job to do. So I actually agree with James that it is a little bit archaic that we still do. I let Amazon put it on my doorstep. I don't really greet the driver every time I get something delivered. So yeah, I think we need to use tech. There's so many options out there. We need more research and we need to be open to bring them in. But then when we free up our time, what we do with that time, I think is really important.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So just to go to one of our other questions from Mark, where we talk about technology, is kind of the smart building and app request, a price of entry now in office fit out and increasingly considered in BTR. Is PBSA behind the times, and is it cost that's keeping that out of PBSA?
It's always going to be cost keeping it out of PBSA. Or development proposals are so tight. We always want to be able to do everything that we can, and you're constantly balancing what's right for students, what's right for design. It's just a juggling act, balancing act. Sorry. So yes, I think it is a huge part to play in it.
Yeah, I think it's cost, and I think it's also the fear that making a decision now means you're going to miss out on something that's developed later on. Yeah. So because of the cost investment, it's like, I've got to get it right. And I think there becomes a fear of, I'll wait and see what the next thing's in, and people kick it down the road more and more, I think. It's
so true. And the great pictures that we're listening to and everything that we are investigating at the moment at Luna, you get to the point where nothing is a problem, that it feels like the dream, but when you come to implement, it's not all as it seems, because we're not quite there yet. So then the next decision comes along in progressing your brand and operations with tech, and you kind of question yourself and you think about, is this going to deliver everything that this person in front of me is telling me it will? And then you go through the same process. So it is hindering decision making on those things, but I think we've got to be brave, because until we use it, we don't get feedback. And I certainly know the brilliant students team, as we work with them and we need different things in concurrent, they listen to us and they build it on. So having the right partners as well is really important.
And I think also with, we're moving towards more of an AI kind of world, and it changes all the time. It has the ability to, so it doesn't really matter with technology if it's not right now. Like you said, you work with partners and it evolves, and technology is advancing all the time, but by not using it, you get left behind. Really, I know, Gen Alpha, we did a piece of research actually this time last year, and for Gen Alpha, it's all about apps. They're not even interested in websites. So, that's going to be the problem moving forward, is that they're completely used to an app-based world as well. And, I will speak past myself. I am not that generation, and it's not the way I work. It's not the way I live. I Google things, I use websites, but we've got to be thinking about these buildings in development. They're for Gen Alpha, and we have to move forward. We haven't got much time left, and we've got some more questions. I just wanted to ask one question to the team, which kind of coincides with one of the questions as well, about academic kind of attainment. Really, do you think our buildings are working hard enough to really support students and their study aspirations?
I think so. University for me is so much more than just the qualification at the end of it. So I'll say that to start with, because I think that it's a massive life lesson. A lot of people go to university to gain independence and life skills. However, you want to get qualification at the end of it. And as we are building our brand guidelines for our future developments, co-working space and pods and private study areas are now top of our agenda. So is that enough though? Is it quiet space? Is it the right music? I'll come back to all of that wellbeing list that your research shows that is supporting academic success. We've got to support the individuals to do the best that they can do. But I think it's on every little touch point in every angle across. It's not just the accommodation, it's the community and wellbeing too.
Yeah, I'm going to come in because I want to mirror some of what Louise has said there, that, and also, do we understand what academic success is? And I'm going to be brutally honest, do our students understand what academic success is, because as Louise said, going to university isn't just the academic side of things. It's so much wider than that, and it's building a network and a community and et cetera, et cetera. And I'm saying that because I partied way more than I should have studied when I was at university. But, you know, going back to the seriousness of it all, you know, do the spaces offer, I keep saying the word flexibility, do they offer that? And actually, we've just opened a new accommodation building a few weeks ago, and there was a bit of and ahhing about how much quiet space do we put in there. And actually, the students didn't want quiet space. There is some, but a very small space, because they want a bit of a, what they told us is they wanted more of like a coffee shop vibe where, you know, there's a bit of background noise. And I get that. When I'm studying, it helps sometimes to have a bit of noise around me. So we tried to create spaces that are a bit more flexible. And I also think that when we talk about, just touching on academic success there, a bit wider than just the academic performance, how do we incorporate that living environment with local opportunities, local volunteering, charities, sustainability? Again, we're talking about, can we bring in sustainability organisations? Our universities don't even do this very well, but are also PBSA talking to local universities and getting in career services to do talks, or local libraries for have got lots of resource. I just think it's wider than just you know, creating a few pods in some spaces. I think there's way more that can be done there, but it's about a real strong 12-month program of activation and engagement with residents in the local area as well.
Doesn't academic growth kind of come, and it's almost kind of supported by social growth and emotional growth? Because once you get to your third year, if you've not had that ability to be able to grow socially and emotionally, how are you going to be able to put together a dissertation that's got proper, meaningful impact? That's going to get you the grade you want? And we've seen just this year, just this week, haven't we, in the news, that academic fees or university fees are going to go up from next year, which I think was probably the only news story that my son actually read, because he was like, oh my God, you know, I've just worked all of this out, and now all of a sudden it's £1,500 more for the 3 years. What happens if I do a master and it's 4 years more? So the impact that he's seeing with that, he wants to make sure that what he does get from that 3 or 4 year course is going to be much more meaningful than just the grade on the end of the paper, because for him, the grade at the end of it, that is almost a given. It has to be, you know, the investment that students make in their future, they need to get that in return. And a lot of universities now, you know, the percentages of first class and 2-1 degrees are much higher than when I went to university. I'm probably similar to you, James. I went to university in Manchester and partied far too hard. But you know, students' focuses have changed, but I would always say that academic success can't ever be achieved just on its own. When you've got students who are moving away at 18, potentially 19, that kind of age bracket to 21, there's an awful lot of kind of social and emotional growth that will underpin that academic success. So their living environments, I think, whilst it's just a place to live, if you look at it very simply, it's actually doing far more than that.
Yeah, and finding that balance, Clayre, you know, really good point about finding that balance between academic success and their own personal well-being, because sometimes, you know, students in our buildings can really put themselves under incredible pressure, and it's dangerous actually sometimes. And you know, bold maybe of me to say that from a university and a really big university side of things, but actually, to be quite honest, I want our students to be safe, and I want their well-being to be protected, and our staff to be trained to step in when they might need to have a conversation with the student. Because yes, we want academic success, but we also want them to be well, actually, and that's really important, and get them to understand that themselves. Yeah.
That positive mind frame, I think, and that comes from having a good quality living environment that works for them and doesn't irk them.
That's great, and I think that's probably a very good quote to close on, Clayre. So thank you for that, because I know that we could carry on talking. I know we've got more questions to ask, but we have run out of time, sadly, so we will have to close today. Thank you, James, Louise and Clayre, for joining us. We really appreciate you coming today and sharing your expertise with us. And thank you all for joining us and taking an interest in our data. As we said earlier, we did create the Youth Forum to provide the sector with free insight, and we would love to carry this on in 2026. So if anyone would be interested in sponsoring the next series of reports and insights, please do get in touch. But for now, a big thank you to our partner Student Crowd and our 2025 sponsor Utopia. Thank you very much. Please look out for our next Youth Forum report, which is all about cost of living, which will be out in November. And we hope to see you all soon again. Thank you very much.